Hey everybody, it's Michael Fisher with Pocketnow.com. Last video we showed you how to install the CM9 build of Android Ice Cream Sandwich on the HP TouchPad tablet. Since it's been 7 days, it's time to review it, but since there's already plenty of reviews out there of CM9 on the touchpad, this time we're going to take it from the perspective of someone who used and loved webOS, me. We'll show you what Android does better, what it does worse, and we'll go on a bug hunt. It's Pocketnow. Let's start right off by talking about one of the more interesting elements of the touchpad, the Touchstone charging dock. Now, with CM9 loaded on the touchpad, you do just still drop it on there, and it still works, which is really, really nice. And you get a nice little blown-up time view in Android. That's all right. In webOS, by contrast, you drop it on the Touchstone, and sure, you can get a time view if you want, but you can also use any number of Touchstone-enabled exhibition applications. So, for example, you can use this application called Glimpse to show you time, weather, Twitter, news. Despite the fact that I have a dual monitor set up on my desktop, this is how I get most of my up-to-date information throughout the day when the touchpad is running webOS. There are other applications, of course, like a weather dashboard, a Facebook plugin, and other exhibition apps that leverage this feature. Gonna have to call webOS a winner on this one. Now let's talk about user interface a little bit. In webOS, apps are housed in cards, which you can flick away, slide back and forth between. It's made the task manager the core method of interacting with the OS instead of just a tacked-on afterthought. Swipes up from the bottom allow you to get back to card view, where you can manage, dismiss, arrange, and basically do anything you want with your open applications. By contrast, with Ice Cream Sandwich, your main function keys are located in the lower left, where you can call up a multitasking view, return to the home screen, or press the back button in some applications. Sometimes that key turns into a keyboard dismissal button, which is handy. Swiping up from the bezel gets you nowhere. It doesn't bring up your applications drawer. For that, you have to go all the way to the upper right-hand corner of the screen and tap the Applications button. Swiping up from the lower right gets you to the Notifications Center, which is handy, and another swipe up will dismiss it. And finally, going back up to the upper right, we switch over to the upper left if you want to do a Google search or if you want to interact with the tablet with your voice. Got that? Yes, the Android approach is a lot less intuitive, and if you're coming from a webOS device, it takes a while to get used to. Android seems to really want you to use all four corners of that device and keep your hand moving across the canvas of the display as much as possible. Why, I don't know. Now, as many of you know, Matias Duarte, who was in charge of designing most of webOS, has since moved over to Google to become the head of the Android user experience, and that shows a bit in Ice Cream Sandwich, most prominently in the multitasking display, where you can call up a list of recently used applications, and if you want to get rid of them from the list, you can toss them off the screen. This doesn't appear to close the applications, or it does close some of the applications and it doesn't others. It just removes them from the launcher. It is inconsistent. It's a little taste of what webOS offered, but it's more window dressing than anything. Still, it's a lot more handy than what we saw in previous iterations of Android as far as task management goes. A very basic but very welcome addition to the touchpad's keyboard in webOS was the addition of a full number row at the top of the keyboard, which prevented you from having to switch back and forth with the Shift key every time you needed to enter numerals. Now, that is not present on the Android version of the keyboard. It's a minor inconvenience, but it's still an inconvenience. By contrast, both keyboards, both webOS and Android, offer a tab key, which is really, really handy when you're filling in multiple fields, like on pizza order forms or address fields or credit card fields, anywhere in the browser where you have to jump between many fields. You don't want to keep your fingers hopping back and forth between the keyboard and the display. So I'm glad this option was thought of in both versions of the keyboard. Let's talk a little bit about bugs. Now, we were using Android version 4.0.3, CyanogenMod version Alpha 0.6. Now, this is an alpha, so bugs are going to be there. I'm not tearing them apart for bugs being present. Like, this is something you have to expect when you're running CM9 on the touchpad. So, first off, the Google Music application did not function properly. I could not get it to play any sound files at all. In addition, the camera functionality is not included in this particular build of CM9 for the touchpad, so I couldn't get the camera working. Now, the touchpad only has a front-facing camera, so that's not really a big deal. Some more exotic bugs happened in Pandora. If you left some applications running for a while, went away, and then came back to them, they would fail to respond. In this instance, Pandora had stopped playing, and no amount of pressing on any of the keys could get it to start playing again. Tried to jump into the task manager and throw it away like I would have done in webOS. Jump back into the application, but that didn't seem to have any kind of effect. A little frustrating. Try to reboot, and you'll notice some touchscreen responsiveness problems on the touchpad. That is not unique to Android, by the way. That problem is going to be dealt with by any user of the touchpad, it seems, no matter what operating system you're running. Thankfully, a reboot did fix that particular problem, but then we ran into another one. When the touchpad display goes to sleep, the music quality goes with it. This is a bug that I could only reproduce maybe 70 to 80% of the time, but it was still annoying to have to keep the touchpad awake whenever I wanted to listen to music. The last bug I'm going to talk about was the biggest one I ran into on the week I was using CM9 on the touchpad, and hands down the biggest impediment to productivity I ran into at all. The keyboard software on this build of CyanogenMod 9 cannot keep up with your keystrokes if you're typing quickly. Now, if you start off typing slowly, if you're a very slow typer, it's not going to be an issue for you. Once you start speeding up, though, the bug becomes apparent. The best way to describe it is that the spacebar trips on itself. It probably has something to do with the autocorrect library lagging, so that when it tries to update the ribbon of possible words you mean along the top of the keyboard, it trips on itself. But the end result is that when the spacebar is tapped, it registers as a double tap more often than not if you're going fast. This leads to periods in the middle of your sentence all the time. Needless to say, it's awkward, and it doesn't result in a great typing experience. In fact, it's really very, very frustrating. And it makes the touchpad borderline unusable for any kind of typing, whether you're messaging, emailing, Facebooking, anything that requires text input via the keyboard. Well, it just turns to garbage. Thankfully, the CyanogenMod team is incredibly resourceful and very talented. If there's not a fix out there already, there probably will be by the time this video goes live. So on the comments to our last video featuring this device, there were a lot of requests for benchmark results. Thanks for the comments, guys, and here's your benchmark tests. On the webOS, we used an app called Lithium Benchmark HD, which yielded us a performance index of 140. And on the Android side, we got a quadrant result of 2622. So the takeaway is, even though Ice Cream Sandwich has brought major improvements to Android as far as user experience and user interface goes, webOS is still more elegant, and it still runs more smoothly than the Alpha that's available for the touchpad right now. That's not saying it's better. It's just saying that for the majority of the functions I needed it for in my week with the touchpad, as a content consumption device and occasional social interaction device, webOS worked better and more reliably. Now, I could not do as much. Obviously, even though the Android market is no place to brag about as far as tablet apps go, the Palm app catalog, or excuse me, the HP app catalog is even more barren, at least now that HP has given up on things. In addition, one of the notes I took during this review period was pretty telling. I was out at a bar waiting for some friends to arrive, and I was using the tablet to do something, and I took a note to myself that read, "I feel more like I'm using a computer than I do with the iPad or with webOS." Depending on who you are, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. What I meant was that it felt like a more complete computing experience in Ice Cream Sandwich. Now that's interesting, to say the least. There's a lot of potential here, just like in the broader Android tablet market, but only time will tell if it's going to be fulfilled. That's it for this one, guys. Once again, it's Michael Fisher with Pocketnow.com from the camera on the HP TouchPad. Thanks for tuning in for this one. If you liked what you saw, leave us a like, leave us a comment. If you didn't, let us know what you didn't like. Most importantly, tune in next time. We'll see you then.